Shrek. What hasn't been said about this humble, bug-loving, onion-smelling green ogre? This man's on a t-shirt, a movie franchise, and a live musical. Shrek isn't just an animated character, he's an institution. Shrek was born out of a three-pronged animated studio blitzkrieg in the 90s. Beginning with DreamWorks coming onto the scene with a competing ant-themed movie to go against Bugs Life, Ants. Do you remember Ants? Ants with a Z for the edgy kids? Then they went after the mainstream Disney crowd with Prince of Egypt, doing their own grand-scale 2D animated movie. And then they finally attacked the fundamental philosophy that drives Disney with... Disney couldn't even comprehend what had hit them. The shots that were fired are some that Disney are still recovering from to this day. Some say the Sidebed diss tracks are the best of all time. Nah, Shrek is the best diss track that's ever been done, if you ask me. Usually when I say that, people sort of give me the look that says, this person is no longer wanted nor welcome in the friendship circle. In fact, why is he even in this circle? I don't believe this man is affiliated with anyone in the group. His interjection into this diss track conversation is wholly unwanted as well, regardless of his opinion. You know, that look. So Shrek dropped, and despite everyone's expectations, it won the Oscar. Not even DreamWorks believed Shrek could have won the Oscar. Now, if you didn't cut the mustard to work on the Prince of Egypt, then you were sent to go and work on Shrek instead. The people at DreamWorks called this being sent to the gulag or being Shreked. It was considered a massive disrespect to be Shrek. But look at both films now. Who's talking about the Prince of Egypt? No one. Shrek better. As time has gone on, I think it's fair to say that Shrek has only seemed to grow in popularity. Between memes and franchising doing what it does, in this day and age, I think it's probably impossible to grow up without Shrek entering you somehow. As I've grown up, I've sort of fallen out of touch a bit with the movies. Like the fact there's 4 mainline Shrek films is a bit of a Mandela effect, if you know what that is. I feel like I can only recall like 2 Shrek movies, maybe. For a long time, I feel as though I've just sort of taken for granted the fact that Shrek bangs. But then every once in a while, I feel like I get these like PTSD style flashbacks where I remember Shrek being a terrible father to 3 babies, or dressing like a weird duke, or being boring. I worry that all the memes and jokes have been hiding a sad truth, that Shrek is not all that. That maybe there's a deathly serious drop-off in quality after the early greatness, or that maybe it was always just trash and cringe, and that the beautiful Shrek culture and community has been masking all of that. But anyway, kick off your shoes, grab a Capri Sun or a fruit shoot, and get nostalgic with me. Come on, get nostalgic with me. Get nostalgic with me! Alright, I'm gonna take off this costume now because it is awful. This is the most uncomfortable costume I've ever worn in my life. There's a bit of metal right here that's been digging into my forehead. It's definitely going to leave a mark. This costume was definitely well worth the over £100 I spent on it. The first Shrek film is an incredibly tight 90-minute animated package with unreal comedy and character. And when you open this package, it explodes in a big way, all over you, and it's great. Shrek is over 20 years old now, but its wrinkles aren't showing because it's such a slick bit of filmmaking. Big ups to the animators that slaved away in the DreamWorks gulag for the beautiful, timeless imagery of Shrek. The start of this film is perfect in so many ways. We open on a fairy tale story about a princess trapped in a guarded tower by a dragon waiting for true love's kiss. Shrek reads the story, then cynically puts it down and pulls out a page to use as toilet paper, dismissing the story as wholly unrealistic. Shrek is a massive green ogre who only loves one thing, his swamp. The world does not see him as a hero. He doesn't fit into tales of true love and beauty, so he rejects the world back. It's kind of refreshing to see a main character who's ugly and friendless and selfish and relatable. You know, he's just trying to get on with his stuff. We learn there's a sort of feudal military that's buying fairy tale creatures, and this is the first direct diss at corporate Disney, like buying up all the fairy tales and that. It's also in this sequence that we meet the beating heart of DreamWorks, Donkey. Donkey is an essential component to Shrek as a character. Donkey loves unconditionally, whereas Shrek loves nobody, not even himself. Donkey is just what he needs to break down his walls. Donkey is loud and obnoxious and winds up Shrek, so there's constant comedic tension. They debate and argue, and this is a driving force for almost all of the comedy in this film. There's sort of like a rhythm to the way Donkey talks, which resonates perfectly with Shrek, and that wouldn't work unless Eddie Murphy was the perfect mix of annoying and funny in his performance. Shrek saves Donkey from being sold as an act of flexing more than anything, but is surprised when Donkey isn't scared of him and actively wants to be his friend. He begrudgingly allows Donkey to stay the night at his swamp, but is disturbed by yet more unwanted, obnoxious fairy tale characters. This sequence is sick. Really building on the horror of Shrek dealing with all these new characters until it climaxes with a huge reveal of hundreds of them camping out in his swamp, taking refuge, literally Shrek's worst nightmare. And we get the iconic line, "What are you doing in my swamp?" Shrek makes an angry speech about how he wants all of them gone, but this is like misunderstood and only positions him as a champion of fairy tale creature rights.
I'm gonna see this guy Farquaad right now and get you all off my land and back where you came from.
Shrek kind of unwillingly and unintentionally makes the world a better and more inclusive place for everyone, but he only cares about his swamp. Shrek and Donkey go to the home of Lord Farquaad, the guy who's out for all the fairy tale characters, who apparently lives in Facebook headquarters.
Lord Farquaad's castle. Do you think maybe he's compensating for something?
Farquaad sets his goons on Shrek, but he clobbers the fuck out of all of them in one of the best fight sequences to ever grace a screen. Once he's battered the shit out of all of them, Lord Farquaad rewards him with a quest. And that quest is to go and save Princess Fiona, who the mirror showed him and he thought was well length. He says if he does that, he'll get rid of all the creatures in his swamp and give it back to him. Shrek and Donkey pretty efficiently manage to rescue the princess, Donkey using his rambunctiousness and Shrek just kind of running about the place while carrying everyone. The action sequence we get out of this is phenomenal. And what adds to the fun of this sequence is how Princess Fiona is expecting, your standard handsome knight to fight with honor, but gets Shrek. This is one of the sequences I remember most, and it's sort of like what I remember when I first think of Shrek 1. And it's a shame in some ways that it happens so early in the film, as the film never gets close to reaching this peak again. Like, don't get me wrong, this is still one of the greatest animated movies ever made, but still, like, you gotta admit, this is by far the best bit in the film. There's also a bit in that sequence where the dragon tries to riz Donkey. So, yeah, that's interesting. But from here, the film kind of becomes a sort of like road trip rom-com where the characters sit around and talk about their feelings. Later on, they do get jumped by Monsieur Hood, one of the greatest characters that never made a return to the Shrek-verse. He's Robin Hood, but French.
Can't you see I'm a little busy?
And there's also that scene where Fiona sings with the birds and they explode. That's a classic. Not much else happens. We get a little bit of will they, won't they between Shrek and Fiona, which is nice. It is a little slow, but, it's nice. Yeah, you see, Shrek likes Fiona, not because she's lame, but because she's not like the other girl. She burps, she eats swamp rats, she fights French people and kills birds. Remember, ogre love works differently to human love. It's mostly down to who can assert the most dominance. We find out Fiona turns into an ogre at night. What? Which is why she was locked away in a tower to begin with. And it can only be fixed with a true love's kiss. But when Shrek is on his way to confess his love to Fiona, he overhears Fiona and Donkey talking about how hideous she looks as an ogre. But Shrek thinks she's talking about him, which makes him really mad at her. Oh no! Shrek is so annoyed at her, he just straight up hands her over to Lord Farquaad. And at first she seems to be a bit attracted to him, Until he's lifted off his horse and it's revealed he's like 3 foot tall, and another L for the short kings. But to be honest, Fiona doesn't seem all that bothered by the whole thing, despite Farquaad being, just about below average height. She decides Shrek is ugly and rides away to a life of prosperity. Shrek shouts at Donkey and tells him to piss off because of what he thought he overheard. And this is where we get to the saddest part of the film, and I unstoppably cry every time at this bit. We see Shrek back at his swamp, all the fairy tale creatures now gone. He finally got what he wanted, his swamp back. But this is not joyous, it's sad. A modern kids film would have their character say, I'm sad, I miss Fiona, I want her back. But Shrek does a montage with no dialogue. We see Fiona and Shrek apart from each other, but with the framing and transition, we've visually shown that the two characters are thinking of each other. From there, Donkey convinces Shrek to rush over and stop Farquaad from marrying Fiona. I think in a way, this scene is a bit conventional. Like, it's not bad, not at all. It ties up the story in a nice, cute way, but like I said, after the hype you get with the dragon breakout scene, the peaks are certainly lower from there. Fiona gets her true love's kiss and turns into her ogre form and embraces it, showing all future incels and internet freaks that it's okay to be a dirty, filthy ogre who swims in shit and mud if that makes you happy. And especially for the time, you have to give it credit for bucking the trend of what most animation studios were doing, inverting the Beauty and the Beast story and showing that beauty truly is in the eye of the beholder. Fundamentally, Shrek is a pretty tightly told hero and princess love story, but what sets Shrek apart as being something special is the world building they put into the story. How they flip classic stories on their heads and still manage to show them in a way that's lasted. Even if they don't play a big role in the film, characters like the Big Bad Wolf, the Gingerbread Man and Pinocchio are all able to get a laugh in at one point or another. It's simple, but it's clever, and it's still pretty fun. Let's hope it keeps the momentum into the next one. The transformation of Shrek 1 to Shrek 2 reminds me a lot of the transformation of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson from the WWE. You got this plush, pillowy ab debut as Rocky Maivia in 96, and then, just 4 years later in 2000, this man's The Rock, and now his veins look like snakes. He's got murder in his eyes. He literally looks like a rock. Basically, Shrek 2 is Shrek 1 on steroids, and it goes on a very short list of sequels that are better than the original. But there's nothing I love more than kicking back, grabbing my Game Boy Advance SP Swamp Edition and loading up the Game Boy video cartridge of Shrek 2. Now this is the way Shrek 2 was meant to be experienced. Off the bat, as sequel material, there's a lot of green flags. Firstly, it's just Shrek 2. There's no stupid title like Shrek 2, Too Much Trouble, or something stupid like that. It's just Shrek 2. It also, like the first film, opens on a fairy tale storybook, which I like a lot. However, this time the story isn't ripped up and dismissed. It is instead dramatized with intense heroic music and Lawrence of Arabia imagery, which establishes the character of Prince Charming. To Prince Charming, the hyperinflated, grandiose fairy tale story is his entire life. He is the hero and the story always goes his way. He's the polar opposite of Shrek at the start of the first film. After this little comedy sketch of an intro, we get another series of short funny moments as we see Shrek and Fiona getting a cute little montage of their honeymoon to painfully 2000 song Accidentally in Love. I'm not going to play it because I will get claimed and I like money, but you know the one. You know the one. The whole thing is letting you know that you are in for a classic Shrek experience. But as soon as they're back from their honeymoon, an important message arrives at Shrek's door. Fiona's parents, the king and queen, have heard she's married and want to meet her Prince Charming. Shrek is very cross about this. He honestly thought he was going to get at least one day back at his swamp, but no. They get back into their car and go to far, far away. From here, Shrek 2 continues to flex all over the original, as we move from the small province of Duloc to the thriving city of Far, Far Away. This place is like the opposite of Duloc, making you really feel like Duloc, if you know what I'm saying. Whereas Duloc was an empty, lifeless, plastic place, Far, Far Away is a thriving, glitzy city, bustling high streets, activity everywhere. We've never seen anything on this scale in Shrek before, and neither has Shrek. As we enter this place filled with wonder and whimsy, the tension builds as it becomes more and more apparent just how out of place this subversive ogre couple are. As the carriage arrives outside the palace, the doors are opened, and Shrek is revealed to the crowd. The gasps, the faint, the dead dove, the disgusted look of Fiona's parents. It hits hard. A door opening to reveal a crowd just like in the first film when Shrek opens his door and is disgusted at all the fairy tale creatures in his swamp. But in the sequel, again, it's reversed. This time, Shrek is invading someone else's swamp. Now, fellas, I'm not gonna lie, the film really pops off from here. Like, every single scene is incredibly good. The king and queen walk towards Shrek and Fiona, who walk towards them. We cut immediately to a dinner scene where the tension between the characters reaches boiling point, and it works to a T. They're sucking us in with the classic gaining the parents' approval style story. This is a perfect way to continue from the first film, with Shrek sort of wanting approval and wanting acceptance despite being a disgusting ogre who smells like onion. Fiona's dad, King Harold, seems to extend an olive branch to Shrek by inviting him out hunting, but the branch has thorns, small cat-shaped thorns, as the king has paid Puss in Boots to assassinate Shrek. But this is an immediate failure because Puss in Boots concedes almost immediately, which makes me question how he ever gained a reputation as a qualified ogre hunter / assassin. Alright, guys, I just checked. It turns out Puss in Boots did actually kill an ogre in his original story. Like, not just the Shrek lore original story, but the story from, like, hundreds of years ago. Either way, Puss in Boots now owes Shrek a life debt because he didn't scran him and just straight up tells him the king hired him. It's here that the film finally decides to take a break. Since Shrek opened that carriage door, the film has been firing all cylinders, non-stop. It's here that the plot finally slows down and we can ask, what the fuck is happening now? We got Shrek, Donkey, and a Mexican cat in boots. What are we going to do with them? Where are we going? What is this for? Love. Shrek loves Fiona and he needs to get approval fast. Shrek decides to visit the fairy godmother in the hopes that she can offer a solution to his marital troubles with some kind of magic. But what Shrek doesn't know, but we know, is the fairy godmother ordered the king to assassinate Shrek in a plot to have her son, Prince Charming, marry Fiona instead. Oh, he's walking straight into a trap! Fairy godmother was rude and dismissive of Shrek, so he trashes her gaff and gets his mitts on a special potion that promises to transform him into a respectable man about town. The sort of man a king can love instead of want to kill. This potion also makes Fiona Leng again, so it's sort of like a win-win for everyone except Prince Charming and Fairy Godmother. Or so Shrek thinks. I think it's worth just having a quick moment aside to gaze upon and admire human Shrek. To know that this beautiful angel of a man lives within the soul of this ogre gives Shrek a layer of both tragedy and beauty, and only adds to his onion layers. So yeah, it's fair to say that human Shrek is my bias, is what I usually say in groups that are debating their biases. Usually if that happens, I get that look, you know, the one that goes, this person is no longer wanted nor welcome in the friendship circle. In fact, why is he even in the circle? I don't believe this man is affiliated with anyone in this group. His interjection into this whole who's your bias conversation is wholly unwanted as well. You know, that look. Shrek rushes to the palace to meet Fiona, but is ambushed in the worst way imaginable. Fairy Godmother locks the geezer in a room and forces him to watch his missus get with another bloke. Not because Fiona is a slag or anything, but because Fiona has been tricked by her family that Prince Charming is actually Shrek. This once happened to me in a club because, you know, I always wear the mask when I'm out and about. I once had a guy pull up on my girl in the same mask and she thought it was me. All the while while her aunt held me back saying, you know, this is better for her. And I've never been able to listen to that song that goes blue, abadi, abada, the same way again. And Shrek 2 really brought that out of me. Speaking of blue, Shrek and his friends are pretty down in the dumps, getting pissed in the pub while the sun's still out. Spirits have never been lower. Shrek's entire identity has been scrutinized, attacked, and then stolen. He's practically ready to lie down and give up. But then whilst wallowing in his misery at the bar, he overhears the king and fairy godmother plotting to trick Fiona into loving Prince Charming with a potion. Shrek dashes off to warn Fiona, but is seen and has the police sent after him. They get arrested and all hope seems lost until the little storybook critters come along to break Shrek out. At this point, Shrek is done playing games. He ain't playing no games no more. He visits the baker's house and they do a Frankenstein bit. He comes charging at far, far away with a gigantic gingerbread man, smashing into the walls and all that. All the while, Prince Charming is getting closer and closer to manipulating Fiona into kissing him to a cover of I Need a Hero sung by the fairy godmother, which honestly fucking slaps. It goes so hard. This is what Shrek 1 needed, an escalation to the insane bombastic action that came before it. We just came from this amazing potion breakout sequence, but now it gets bigger with a gingerbread kaiju thing. You just keep getting smacked with high stakes stimulus and it's great. Each sidekick slash companion gets a moment to help Shrek get to Fiona, but it's seemingly all in vain as it builds up to a climactic finish where Prince Charming kisses Fiona. But then it's revealed that the dad switched the T's earlier. Eventually we get the reaffirmation of the message in Shrek 1, where Fiona chooses an ogre life over a human one. We even have the revelation that the king's true form is a frog, and his wife embraces him equally as if he was a human. Would you love your girlfriend or boyfriend if they turned into a frog? Shrek says you should. All in all, Shrek 2 is a masterpiece of a film. It seems like every scene in this film is a brilliant comedy sketch in its own right, like the limo scene where the seemingly sweet fairy godmother acts like an intimidating mob boss, or the scene in which they watch a reality cop show set in the Shrekverse, complete with references to catnip and pepper spray.
Catnip. That's no mine.
At other points, Shrek feels a lot like blockbuster filmmaking, with impressive set pieces and Game of Thrones style family dramas. It does all this whilst continually incorporating reference humor, fairy tales, and almost doubling its character roster. What's even more impressive than this is how the plot is weaved so brilliantly together to mirror the story of the first, but with more ambition and scope. So yeah, Shrek 2 lives up to the hype, but after this, this is where the void begins. Shrek the Third is probably the deepest depths of failure Shrek reaches after the glory that is Shrek 2. This film makes you feel like Shrek's been gaslighting you this whole time. Shrek's gone from a fun-loving ogre of the people to this hollow green fool devoid of all the character development that's happened over the last couple of films. Out the gate, there's too many red flags to deal with. Shrek, Shrek 2, Shrek the Third? What? What's wrong with you, Shrek? Well, you had to go messing with the titles. Now it's all ruined. Second red flag, no storybook opening. We're just thrown straight in, totally unceremoniously. The storybook opening was a staple. It's like the long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. The curtain call of something iconic. It sets the film up with a little story and then a punchline, giving you a sense of tone and genre, but not this time. You know what type of movies throw you into the plot without ceremony? Adam Sandler movies. So that means from the very moment Shrek the Third graces the cinema screen, it's devastating our favourite ogre's legacy. Third red flag, we don't even see the swamp, Shrek's favourite place in the world. We get an update on Prince Charming, who's alone and a failing actor. Then we see Shrek still in far, far away doing kingly duties. No mud baths, no gargling on mud and eating bugs, no ogre stuff. It doesn't even feel like this acts as a conscious subversion. It just feels like the writers felt this would be a funny way to open Shrek the Third, but it wasn't. Where is the storybook opening? Fourth red flag, there isn't an opening montage to dad music with reference humor. That's right, nothing to establish where Shrek is in his life, and the only thing they want to reference is the previous Shrek movie. Shrek the Third isn't preoccupied with setting a scene, you're just thrown into the plot, and off the gate, Shrek is bored and deflated, much like the audience will likely be throughout this film. He's filling in for the king's duties because the king is ill, so we see Shrek just meander about doing king duties and suck at it because he's trying to be a human instead of an ogre king. An ogre king rules with brute force and dominance. They do not get put into tight human-fitting clothes, they war and pillage. Eventually, after a bit, the king croaks. Do you get it? Do you get it? Because he's a frog. The king really wants Shrek to take his place as king, but Shrek refuses the crown, so it instead goes to Fiona's cousin Arthur. Shrek sets off to find the heir in another land, but just as Shrek's leaving, Fiona tells him that she's expecting a litter of ogre pups. Now this is where the second act sort of begins, and this is the fifth red flag. The inciting incident for both Shrek 1 and 2 is firmly and powerfully defined. Shrek's swamp is invaded by fairy creatures. Shrek meets the parents of the woman he turned into an ogre. Both scenarios are deeply impacted to Shrek and force him to take decisive action that moves the plot plot forwards. In Shrek the Third, it just feels like Shrek isn't really that involved in this adventure, seeming more distracted about the prospect of being a dad. And off the gate, you know full well that Shrek won't be king, and you also know that Shrek is going to enjoy being a dad. There's no doubt from the offset how any of the conflicts in this film will be overcome. This is a massive step down from the originals. Whereas the previous films used fantasy plots and rom-com storylines, this film kind of decides it's just going to be Shrek on his own. There are a couple of scenes in a medieval high school, but they don't really do any story beats you'd see in a high school comedy. They also do sort of like an all-female fairy tale Avengers thing for a bit, but they just escape and go back to Shrek at the end. I think the main problem is it doesn't feel like the film has any real point to it. Like, this kid is called Arthur and Merlin is in it, but there are no storylines that correlate with the stories of King Arthur. Like, if you imagine Shrek, Donkey and Puss in Boots finding the Holy Grail, that's an actual movie. Shrek the Third is only really about characters moving from one place to another place for some given reason. So Shrek sails to meet Arthur and then sails back, but the boat crashes. So they hang around with Merlin for a bit and then they go back. That's the whole movie, with some shit with Prince Charming at the end. Prince Charming's only motivation in this movie is to do what his mother wanted and become king. It's a weak motivation, but his plan is even weaker. His plan is to get all the villains on his side and storm the castle. Wow, incredible. Arthur and Merlin are the only new characters that are introduced, and they are the worst characters in the whole Shrekverse. They don't even get mentioned in Shrek 4. Arthur is just a little weasel who doesn't want to do anything. He's voiced by Justin Timberlake, which is weird because I thought he's supposed to be like a nerd or something. But he doesn't seem smart either, and he doesn't have any friends. But he doesn't have any social anxiety. So yeah, I'm kind of just getting like a bit of psychopath energy from him. There must be a reason why all the other kids are avoiding him. Merlin is just a weird guy who has no role in the plot. He makes Donkey and Puss in Boots switch bodies, but that doesn't really do anything to affect the story. He also teleports them to far, far away after the boat crashes. I think they were going for like a mental wizard or something, but he just seems like a kind of obnoxious uncle who has too many wines at Christmas and makes sex jokes at you and waggles his eyebrows. Fiona is given this B-plot that essentially boils down to Fiona's baby shower is interrupted by Prince Charming storming the castle, and as I already said, that's shit. The theme of body transformation and magic has completely disappeared as well. Aside from the pointless body swap, there's no idea of true love's kiss or wanting to change yourself, and there's hardly any creatively used fantasy ideas. We don't get anything like the dragon escape sequence or the potion heist sequence. In fact, a lot of the animation feels like it has taken a bit of a downgrade, to be honest. Colors seem a bit more muted, the fantasy characters seem more human-like and less diverse. It's like Shrek has forgotten how to frame itself and make it feel cinematic. Shrek, who has spent the last two movies fighting the oppressive power systems, is now actively fighting to keep them running. The climax of the film is set during a play that Prince Charming is putting on. It's here that Arthur addresses the fairy tale villains who storm the castle. He tells them that they're only villains if they believe they are, and that they can be anything they want as long as they believe in themselves. But you see, this is all wrong. These villains drink and laugh obnoxiously and are filthy and weird, but that's just the way they are. But Arthur's saying that's wrong. They're making bad decisions and they should change. It's not the system that lets them down, it's themselves. This totally runs against the first message that Shrek 1 and 2 tells. The message that you don't need to be the most perfectly put together, tidy person to deserve a happy life. You can be a bit antisocial and gross and still hate true love. Shrek the Third doesn't care about any of that. It just wants you to conform and stop being your fucking self. It betrays the fundamental message of what defined it in the first place while putting it in a totally irrelevant package. Whilst both Shrek 1 and 2 have their moments of truly feeling like AAA blockbuster movies, Shrek the Third simply feels like a straight-to-DVD empty mess. The Shrek your nan accidentally picks up at HMV because she couldn't tell the difference between the cover of Shrek 2 and Shrek 3. But the void doesn't end there. Shrek 4 Shrek Forever After, or Shrek 4 The Final Chapter 3D as it's alternatively called, which I mean really puts the nail in the coffin, is undoubtedly an improvement of the corpse of Shrek the Third, but despite this, certain elements that rot have carried over, and you can tell things just aren't the same. We get off to a decent start with a fairy tale book style opening like we got with the good Shreks. Yes, get in! But we are reintroduced to the character of Rumpelstiltskin, who was present in the last film, but was more of a background lackey to Prince Charming than a character of note. His looks changed a little. He now looks like he's about to pull off an insane Minecraft speedrun. Anyway, sometime before Shrek saves Fiona, Rumpelstiltskin was nearly going to make the king and queen sign a shady contract to get their daughter Fiona back in return for the whole of Far, Far Away. But right as they're about to sign, they're told Fiona has been saved by Shrek, leaving Rumpelstiltskin salty ever since. Shrek now has kids and has settled into domestic life, but feels like something is missing. No one fears him anymore like they did in the classic Shrek days. Everyone loves him. He can't can't do no wrong. All this time spent being a dad instead of an intimidating ogre. Fiona doesn't really understand because she's not a real ogre. Anyway, Shrek ends up getting overwhelmed by the kids crying at their birthday party and the little fat kid constantly telling him to
do the roar.
He flips out at the birthday party, making everyone uneasy by punching the cake. I did that once. I was turning 17 and I hadn't really organised a birthday party. So I just did a post on Facebook saying, everyone welcome over at mine for my birthday. If you want to come, just come. Here's my address. 4 people showed up and I punched the cake and everyone cried. So yeah, Shrek 4 really brought that out on me. After this, Shrek runs into Runspun Skillskin, who listens to Shrek's plight and offers to trade him a day as the ogre he once was in exchange for a day when he was a mindless baby that he won't even remember. Shrek agrees and is taken to the alt Shrekverse. This is a really interesting idea and it's all fine, but none of it is great. Why? Because of what's carried over from Shrek the Third. Shrek is no longer as funny. There are 3 jokes about ham in this film. That's how dry it's gotten. A joke in good Shreks are weird, crass, a lot of the time something only older kids and adults would understand, but now the humour is just do the raw and ham jokes. It doesn't really help that this is the bleakest Shrek film we've seen. Shrek discovers that his swamp has all dried up and that the donkey is a slave to witches, shaken by the horrors of his abuse. I originally watched this film on a coach on my way back from a school trip to Belgium. This is the real story, by the way. And we hit a speed bump, and I don't know why, but around this time in the film, the screen on the coach shifted to black and white. And I honestly thought that it was just a bold artistic decision that they deliberately decided to make. And looking back, I don't think I'm crazy for that, as this film seems to be inspired by a black and white film called It's a Wonderful Life. It's a proper old film about a guy who's going to jump off a bridge, but then an angel comes and shows him what the world would be like if he was never born. Because that's what happens to Shrek. That's this film. The day Rumpelstiltskin takes is the day Shrek was born. So Shrek is in a world where he was never born, and when the day ends, so will Shrek. Rumpelstiltskin is the fascistic ruler of the land. Is that how you say it? Fascistic?
Fascistic.
Yeah, fucking smash that. The ogres, all the ogres are being persecuted, so they have to live underground and spend their time planning a revolution led by Fiona and Puss in Boots, who is fat and lazy now. But Puss, he's supposed to be an ogre assassin. Now, I will give some credit here. At least Shrek 4 manages to find something to fill its time with. Even though it feels a little bit empty, seeing how the characters have developed without Shrek's existence is more interesting than not doing anything like the last Shrek. They're actually trying here as we see them invert the Shrek and Donkey dynamic. By this time having Shrek be the annoying guy that won't leave Donkey alone. I like that. It's good. Donkey helps Shrek realize that Rumpelstiltskin always has a get out clause in his contract that you can find by folding it up into a shape. I don't know why he has that. It seems like a very, very obvious flaw in his plans. Shrek finds his hidden get out clauses to get true love's first kiss, which makes sense with like a potion or a spell, but this is a legal contract. There's no need to get kissing involved. It also makes me wonder how Fiona's parents would activate their get out clauses. It seems they stopped existing at the moment of signing. So Shrek has to get true love's first kiss from Fiona again, but this time it's in like a Mad Max apocalyptic world, and Fiona knows her value better now that Shrek's not been able to spend years gaslighting her that she wants to live in his gross swamp with him. Shrek and Donkey accidentally find the underground ogre resistance camp where Fiona is, so Shrek is happy he's found Fiona and he runs to her, and he gets clarted because she obviously doesn't know who he is in this universe. Shrek's game with Fiona is pretty god-awful. He tries a couple of moves on her, but it's a disaster. But then Shrek unlocks the true chap within him and realizes that Fiona only cares about one thing, the revolution. He explains with complete accuracy that the best way to liberate the ogres is to kiss him right here. Now this is some high-level pickup artistry. She kisses him, but it's a complete dud. Nothing happens, and the world is still black and white. We're now picking apart what constitutes love in the Shrekverse. Like, I never really believed that Fiona actually loved Shrek in the first one. They only really knew each other for a day and a half. But now Shrek only has a few hours to make the woman who's never met him love him. And on top of that, he is surrounded by way more attractive and socially attuned ogres. Like, look at this one. Who wouldn't pick him over Shrek? I want to have his half-human, half-ogre babies. It feels like Shrek is fighting a losing battle from the start. In the end, all the ogres get kidnapped and Shrek tricks Rumpelstiltskin by handing himself in and collecting the rewards, a free wish. Anything he wants. You think Shrek would wish to go back to how things were at the start of the film, or for Rumpelstiltskin to have never been born, or for a swamp back, but no. Shrek makes the biggest brain, 1000 IQ move here. Shrek wishes for all the ogres to be freed. Now, think about this. Why does Shrek want this? Because he knows Fiona only cares about one thing. Ogres can be very simple-minded like this. Shrek's swamp is his one thing, and Fiona's one thing is the revolution. Shrek doesn't actually care about freeing the ogres. He barely even spoke to them, let alone formed any kind of bond. But Shrek knows that freeing the ogres is the ultimate act of liberation. But this time, true love's kiss will make it so none of this ever happens. So they have a scrap with Dragon, and Shrek begins to fade away as the day is about to end. Oh no! But at the very last second, Shrek and he gets the kiss and Shrek returns to the birthday party. The ending of this film is quite cute. I may have almost shed a tear, although that could be because I was extremely sleep deprived after watching 4 Shrek films back to back. Shrek is completely changed now. So happy to exist and not be in the dystopian Shrekverse. But what's the message of the film? I think it's quite obvious. Don't miss your old swamp life because it could be way worse for you. Just be a productive member of society and shut up. Ultimately, Shrek 4 is better than the third one, but it still definitely lacks the magic that made the first 2 films special. The first 2 Shrek films are important bits of cinema. They alone justify why we have such a massive expanded culture around Shrek with memes and fan projects. But 3 and 4 they just don't really feel like Shrek movies. Do you know what I mean? They seem to lack the meaning and magic of the first 2. I honestly wouldn't say either of them are atrocious, but they're just not close to being up to par with the first 2. Shrek deserved better. Shrek is better. So unfortunately, as a film franchise, when we quantify the quality of all the movies over a median, it's a 6.5, maybe a 7 at a push out of 10. Subscribe!